In Module 3, we will examine the tissues. So in Module 1, we started at the chemical level of organization. And in the chemical level, we saw that molecules were constructed from atoms and elements that were joined together by chemical bonds. In Module 2, we saw that those molecules composed cells. And here we will see that many cells compose a tissue. And tissues are defined as groups of similar cells with a common or related function, and also have a common embryonic origin. The study of tissues is known as histology. So we see that there are 4 tissue types in the human body: nervous, muscle, epithelial, and connective tissue. We will begin with the epithelial tissues. So the epithelial tissues function in 2 major ways in the human body. The first is that they form coverings or linings on body surfaces or body cavities. And second, they function as glands. The epithelia that form coverings and linings function in protection of deeper tissues. They also function in absorption, filtration, and also have some sensory functions associated with them. The epithelia that form glands functions to secrete, so that is, the gland cells will produce a substance and then pass that substance to the external surface of the body, or they'll pass that substance into a body cavity. So we see the following characteristics associated with epithelial tissues that form coverings and linings. We see that they have polarity, so that is, the tissue has 2 surfaces, and those 2 surfaces each have a different function. We'll see more on this in just a moment. They are typically joined with cell-cell junctions that we examined back in Module 2. So, for example, the desmosomes and the tight junctions, as well as some gap junctions as well. The epithelial tissues are avascular, so that is, they lack blood vessels entirely. However, they are innervated, which means that they contain sensory nerve fibers as well as sensory receptors to help them function in that capacity of sensory reception. Because epithelial tissues are found on the body surfaces and also function as linings, the cells of the epithelial tissues have a very high capacity to regenerate. And so we see that the tissue will quickly create new cells to replace worn out or damaged cells. And so this is why, for instance, a cut inside of your mouth will heal very quickly. The cells of epithelial tissues typically exhibit polarity, meaning that the sheet of epithelial cells has a top surface and a bottom surface, and each of those surfaces has a different function. The apical surface is the superficial surface of the epithelia that borders the open space. And this is the surface that is protective, or if the epithelium is a gland, that is the surface that's going to secrete the substances that the gland produces. On the other side, we have the basal surface, which is the deep surface of the epithelial tissue, and it faces the connective tissue that's underneath. We'll see that all epithelia are associated with a connective tissue underneath them, and this is because the connective tissue underneath the epithelia contains blood vessels, which are going to function to nourish that epithelial tissue. The cells of epithelial tissues also need to fit together tightly in order to protect deep layers. And so for that reason, epithelial tissues are typically abundant in things like tight junctions, which are going to help to seal the spaces between adjacent epithelial cells, and therefore prevent materials or liquids from seeping down into deeper layers. These are pretty typical and common cell-cell junctions that we see in the skin, as well as in the epithelia that lines the digestive system. Many epithelial tissues are also very abundant in desmosomes, which will help them to resist tearing forces, so they're very tear resistant because of the presence of these desmosome linkages.